What happens when 6 hunters push 20 acres of timber and a 150 class buck decides he is not leaving? Because deer drives produce the most unpredictable, adrenaline-soaked moments in all of whitetail hunting. And the 25 you are about to hear actually happened. I have been running organized deer drives with the same group of guys for 19 seasons, across properties in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. My notebook has entries from over 200 drives. Some of them went exactly as planned. Most of them did not. And the ones that did not teach you more about how mature bucks process pressure than any trail camera or scouting session ever will. If you have a deer drive story that belongs on this list, I want to hear it. Stay until the end, because number 25 is the drive moment that every experienced driver has witnessed but nobody talks about, and it will change how you position your standers permanently. A deer drive, for those of you who have not done one, is an organized hunting strategy where a group of hunters splits into two teams. The drivers walk through a block of timber or cover to push deer toward the standers, who are positioned at strategic exit points where deer are likely to break out. The drivers move, the standers wait. When it works, a pushed deer walks or runs into a stander's shooting lane and the stander takes the shot. When it does not work, the stories are even better. Number 1. The buck that ran backward through the drivers. A push through a 15-acre block of hardwood timber in Crawford County, Pennsylvania, that Allegheny Plateau country, between Titusville and Meadville, where the ridges are flat-topped and the timber is thick second-growth oak and cherry. 6 drivers walking abreast at 40-yard spacing, roughly the distance from home plate to second base. A mature 10-point let the entire line pass within 20 yards of his bed without moving. Then he stood up and walked, not ran, walked back through the line of drivers in the opposite direction. A driver in the middle of the line heard a branch snap behind him, turned around, and the buck was standing at 15 yards looking at him. He made the shot. That buck was 4.5 years old and had survived 3 previous drives on the same timber by using the same tactic. Let the pressure pass. Walk out the back door. Number 2. The buck that crossed the road between standers. 4 standers posted on a logging road with 60 yards between positions, roughly the distance from home plate to the outfield wall. The drivers push a ridge. A mature buck breaks cover, sprints across the road in the gap between the second and third stander, and disappears into the next block. Everyone saw antlers. Nobody had a clear shooting lane. The post-drive argument about who should have been 30 yards to the left lasted longer than the drive itself. Number 3. The buck that froze inside the drive. Drivers moving through thick laurel in the Appalachian ridges. A doe breaks and runs. The drivers keep pushing, expecting a buck behind her. He never comes out. A veteran driver who had been doing this for 40 years stopped his line, told everyone to hold, turned around, and walked back 50 yards into cover he had already pushed through. The buck was standing completely still in a patch of mountain laurel so thick you could not see 10 feet. The old-timer said he kills more bucks walking backward through a drive than forward. Number 4. The opening morning drive that was over by 7:15 a.m. Opening day of rifle season. The camp drive through the big timber block that everyone has been watching on cameras since August. The 3.5-year-old 8-point that had been on camera 47 times breaks exactly where the most experienced stander predicted. One shot at 35 yards, roughly the distance across a tennis court. Camp is done hunting by 10 a.m. The freezer is full. The rest of the week is football and cards. Drives that work like this are remembered for decades. Number 5. The buck that came to the noise like it was a bugle. Mixed hardwood terrain in eastern Ohio. The drivers are pushing a ridge and making noise, stepping on branches, talking at normal volume. A mature buck hears the commotion and instead of running from it, trots toward the stander line, processing the noise as a competing buck working through his territory. He stops at 25 yards broadside in front of the stander. The noise that pushes most bucks away brought this one in. The drive was the call. Number 6. The doe that turned the buck. Standers posted on the downhill side of a push. A doe breaks first and runs parallel to the stander line instead of through it. A mature buck 80 yards behind her changes direction to follow her, turning 90 degrees away from the standers. The buck that was heading toward a 20-yard shot ends up going the wrong direction because of one doe. Every experienced driver knows this rule. Does go where they want. Bucks go where does go. Number 7. The swamp drive, where everything went wrong and the biggest buck of the season died anyway. Pushing a cattail swamp in central Wisconsin, that flat marshland and tag alder country west of Wausau, where the ground is frozen hard enough to walk on in late November, but soft enough that every step sounds like a drumbeat. Drivers waist-deep in water, completely separated from their original positions. A buck breaks from a floating mat of cattails nobody knew was there. A stander on the only dry ground in the area takes a shot at 40 yards through a gap in the cattails. The most chaotic drive of the season produces the biggest buck of the year. A 145-inch 9-point that had survived 4 previous swamp drives because nobody had ever pushed far enough into the marsh to find his bed. The lesson from that swamp drive is one I carry into every drive since. The cover you do not want to push through is the cover the biggest bucks call home. Research from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources on pressured buck behavior documented that mature bucks in heavily hunted areas select bedding locations specifically in terrain that humans avoid, including standing water, dense briars, and steep blowdown tangles. The bucks are not in the hard cover because they like getting wet. They are in the hard cover because you do not like getting wet. My wife asked me why I came home from that swamp drive with wet boots, wet pants, scratches on my face, and a 145-inch buck in the truck bed. I told her the swamp is where the big ones live. She said it looks like the swamp is where my dry clothes go to die. Number 8. The grunt that stopped a running buck mid-drive. A driver pushing through oak timber sees a buck ahead of him moving fast toward the stander line. The buck hears another driver and breaks direction. The driver cups his hands around his mouth and gives one grunt, no tube, just his voice. That 3 seconds is all the stander needs. The unexpected grunt in the middle of a drive is one of the most underused tactics in organized driving. Quick pause here. Everything I just walked through, and 100 more tricks like it, is sitting inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages of the stuff that actually puts deer on the ground. And right now, if you grab it, I am throwing in the 30-day opening day roadmap completely free. That is a 60-page day-by-day preseason plan that walks you from the first scout to opening morning, so you start this season ahead of every other hunter in the woods. Link in the description, QR code on screen. This is the season you stop guessing. Number 9. The tracking dog that found the buck the humans missed. A blood-trailing dog brought in after a questionable shot during a drive in northern Wisconsin. The dog works the scent through the same timber the entire drive just pushed through. The buck had doubled back and bedded in cover, 80 yards from where the drivers walked. The dog finds him alive. The recovery team makes a clean finishing shot. That drive ended exactly where it started. The dog found what 6 pairs of human eyes missed. Number 10. The stander who was checking his phone. Every camp has this story. The stander had been on post for 45 minutes. Nothing moving. He picks up his phone to check the time. A buck walks past at 30 yards while his eyes are down. He looks up in time to see antlers disappearing into timber. The drive works perfectly. The human element fails. It is the most relatable moment in all of deer camp, and half of you just winced because you have either lived it or watched it happen. Number 11. The buck that ran straight down the logging road. Logging road through the center of the drive block. Standers on both ends. The buck breaks into the road, and instead of crossing, runs the road straight down the middle between 2 stander positions. Everyone on the road has a shooting lane, but the buck is running parallel to all of them. The shot that works in this scenario belongs to the one stander who anticipated this possibility and positioned himself 30 yards off the road in the timber where the buck would eventually turn. Number 12. The 3-buck drive where every stander tagged out. The rarest moment in organized deer driving. A well-executed push through prime bedding cover produces 3 bucks breaking through 3 stander positions simultaneously. 3 shots, 3 deer on the ground. The drive that produces this moment takes years to repeat and is the defining camp story for a generation. Ours happened on a 22-acre block of red oak and hemlock timber in Potter County, Pennsylvania, that northern tier country between Coudersport and Gaelton, where the state forest land runs for miles and the deer density supports buck harvest rates that most eastern states cannot match. The 3 bucks all broke within 45 seconds of each other. The standers were spaced at roughly 80 yards, about the distance from one end zone to the other. Each stander had rehearsed his shooting lane the morning before the drive. Each stander made his shot inside 40 yards. The camp went through a case of beer that night celebrating, and the photo from that afternoon with 3 bucks hanging on the camp pole has been framed on the wall of that cabin for 11 years. Number 13. The buck that jumped the fence at the stander. Property line fence at the end of a drive block. The pushed buck hits the fence at full speed, launches over it, and lands 15 yards in front of the stander. The fence is the funnel nobody mapped but every mature buck uses as an escape route. Number 14. The lost driver who accidentally pushed the best buck. A new driver who loses his bearings in thick cover, wanders off his assigned line, and pushes through a section of timber nobody planned to drive. He bumps a mature buck, bedded completely outside the planned drive area. The buck runs through an unplanned gap in the stander line where one veteran is posted on a hunch. The best drives sometimes work because somebody got lost. Number 15. The drive that worked because of a grandfather's advice. A stander repositions himself 40 yards from his assigned post because his grandfather told him 30 years ago that the big bucks in this timber always run the low creek crossing, never the ridge. The formal drive plan puts him on the ridge. He moves to the creek. The buck comes through the creek crossing at 20 yards. The drive plan works for everyone else. His grandfather's knowledge works for him. Number 16. The buck that used the driver as cover. A buck pushed from his bed runs directly toward a driver, slows to a walk, and moves alongside him at 30 yards using the driver as a visual shield from the stander line. The driver cannot shoot, he is moving. The standers cannot see the buck, it is blocked by the driver's movement. The buck walks out the back of the drive untouched. The most sophisticated escape behavior I have ever seen during an organized drive. Number 17. The fawn that led its mother into the stander, and the buck followed. A fawn pushes through the stander line first. Its mother follows. A mature buck trailing the doe breaks into the stander's position third, completely committed to following the doe and completely unaware of the hunter. The fawn was the most unintentional and most effective deer call in the history of that drive. Look, I am going to be straight with you. Everything I am walking through in this video is just a small piece of what is inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages, 101 field-tested tricks. And right now, you also get the 30-day opening day roadmap free with it. A 60-page day-by-day plan that gets you ready before the season even starts. I do not know how long that bonus stays in the deal, but if you have been watching these videos and thinking this could be my season, that is the move. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Make this the year. Number 18. The buck that escaped to the property line. Perfect push. Perfect stander positions. Buck moving exactly as planned. Then it turns 20 yards before the property boundary because the timber changes, and it detects the edge. It walks the boundary line just inside the neighbor's land and disappears. Every drive hunter in the upper Midwest has this story. The boundary line is the most consistent escape route for mature bucks on pressured properties. Number 19. The two-man drive that killed a 170 class buck. Not a camp drive. 2 hunters. 1 piece of timber. 1 hour. 1 man pushes slowly on a north wind pushing scent away from the stander. The buck moves ahead of the driver without alarm. Not running, not blowing, and steps into a shooting lane at 35 yards. The biggest buck of either hunter's life, taken on the simplest possible drive, with the minimum possible crew. You do not need 8 guys and a walkie-talkie to drive deer. 2 men who know their ground can do more than a platoon that does not. The 2-man drive is the most underrated tactic in whitetail hunting, and it is the format I use more than any other. The key is speed, or more accurately, the lack of it. A 2-man drive covers a timber block of 5 to 10 acres, roughly 4 to 8 football fields, in 30 to 45 minutes. The driver walks at roughly 1 step every 3 to 4 seconds. That pace does not alarm mature deer. It nudges them. They get up from their beds and move ahead of the driver at a walk, not a sprint. A walking deer presents a shot opportunity. A sprinting deer does not. Research from Penn State's College of Agricultural Sciences documented that deer pushed slowly through cover move at an average pace of roughly 2 miles per hour and stop frequently to assess the threat. Deer pushed aggressively move at 15 to 20 miles per hour and do not stop until they are 300 yards from the disturbance. The slow push produces the shot. The fast push produces the missed opportunity. Number 20. The buck that came back 3 times. A buck pushed from bedding cover ran to the stander line, turned before presenting a shot, circled back through the drivers, re-entered the bedding area, and was pushed again. 3 passes through the same timber block. Third push, same stander position, different angle. The third pass produces the shot, the drive that teaches patience. Number 21. The driver who became the stander mid-drive. A driver pushing through timber bumps a mature buck that circles back and comes from behind the drive line. The driver stops, turns around, and becomes the only stander between the buck and open country. No assigned position, no prepared shooting lane. A 30-second window to make a decision and execute a shot at 25 yards in terrain he was supposed to be walking through, not hunting from. The hunters who kill mature bucks on drives are the ones who adapt when the plan stops working. Number 22. The evening drive with 17 minutes of light left. Last afternoon of the season, tags unfilled. The camp organizes one final push through the big timber everyone has been saving. Shooting light ends in 45 minutes. The drive takes 30. A mature buck breaks at the 28-minute mark with 17 minutes of legal light remaining. The urgency of the final push and the limited light focus every hunter in camp on a single moment. Whether the shot connects or not, this is the drive story that camps tell forever. Number 23. The trail camera that proved the hold. A Reconyx camera at $350, placed at the drive exit, captured this. A mature buck bedded in the drive block let 6 drivers walk within 60 yards of him, roughly the distance from home plate to the outfield wall, without moving. After the drive passed, he stood up, shook himself off, and walked out of the timber calmly, at exactly the location where the standers had been posted 20 minutes earlier. He processed the threat, identified the pattern, and waited it out. The footage that proved beyond any doubt that mature bucks on pressured properties do not always run from drives. Sometimes they simply outlast them. That camera footage changed how I position standers. I now leave one stander in position for 30 minutes after the drive passes through, because the bucks that hold are the bucks worth shooting, and they move after the pressure leaves. My buddy who runs drives in Tuscarawas County, Ohio, that rolling agricultural and timber country south of Canton where the Amish farms border state game land and the deer pressure during gun season is heavy, started leaving a silent stander in position after every drive 4 seasons ago. In that time, his camp has killed 3 mature bucks on the post-drive hold. All 3 bucks stood up and moved between 8 and 22 minutes after the last driver passed through. All 3 were killed at distances under 30 yards, roughly the distance from the pitcher's mound to home plate. 3 bucks that would have walked away untouched if the stander had followed the drivers out of the timber. Number 24. The drive that revealed where every buck was hiding. A property hunted hard for 6 weeks, with 0 mature buck sightings. A single drive through the central timber block produces 4 mature bucks breaking through stander positions, all from the same 10-acre section of cover that nobody had been hunting because it looked like transitional timber with no obvious features. The drive did not produce a kill. It produced the intelligence that the following October's stand placement was built entirely around. The drive that reveals the location is sometimes worth more than the drive that produces a shot. Number 25. The new guy who killed the biggest buck. Every camp has this one. The newest hunter in the group, first season, assigned the easiest stander position because nobody expected action there, ends up with the biggest buck of the drive standing at 25 yards because the experienced hunters covered all the obvious positions and left the one the mature buck actually used. The new guy makes the shot. The experienced hunters spend the rest of the season explaining why what happened was not luck. Nobody believes them. The new guy's buck is still the biggest one on the wall at camp. If you have a drive story that belongs on this list, leave it below. Next time we are covering the 5 stand placement mistakes that cost more bucks than bad shooting ever will. The best deer drives are not about covering ground. They are about understanding how a pressured buck thinks, where he hides, how he moves, and what he does when the plan falls apart. The moments on this list happened because the deer did something nobody predicted. The hunters who filled their tags were the ones who stopped following the plan and started following the buck. That is the difference between a drive that fills a tag and a drive that fills a story. Both have value, but the freezer only cares about one. And if you are sitting in a tree stand right now watching an empty food plot on a Saturday afternoon in November, consider this. Every deer drive in this list started with a group of hunters who decided that sitting and waiting was not working. They got up, they moved, they pushed cover that nobody had pushed all season. And they found deer that had been invisible to every stand hunter on the property for weeks. The stand is a tool. The drive is a tool. The best deer camps use both. And the stories that last, the ones your grandkids will hear someday, almost always involve the drive where the plan fell apart, and the buck did something nobody expected. That is the beauty of driving deer. The deer always get a vote.